Admiral Tae Woo stood alone in the center of the Great Hall. Around him, creatures from 47 different worlds watched from their floating seats. Some had scales, some had tentacles, some had no bodies at all. Just clouds of glowing energy. All of them looked at him like he was dirt on their floor. He had traveled 18 months to reach this place. The Galactic Assembly Hall was the largest structure ever built. It floated in empty space between 3 star systems. A monument to the power of species who had conquered the darkness between worlds. Humanity wanted to join them. Humanity wanted protection. Humanity wanted to matter. The hall fell silent as High Overlord Vreth raised one of his forearms. He was tall and thin, with gray skin that looked like wet stone. His people, the Dominion, controlled nearly half of known space. When he spoke, everyone listened. The creatures from Earth wish to address us again, Vreth said. His voice echoed through the hall. This is their 3rd request for membership. I believe we all remember the first 2. Laughter rippled through the assembly. Tae Woo kept his face still. He had practiced this moment for months. He would not show them his anger. Speak quickly, human, Vreth continued. We have important matters to discuss. Tae Woo bowed his head slightly. Thank you, High Overlord. I come to ask once more for humanity's admission to the Galactic Collective. Our people are new to the stars, but we learn fast. We work hard. We wish only to. You wish to hide behind our fleets, Vreth interrupted. Your colonies are attacked by pirates. Your ships are weak. Your weapons are primitive. You come here begging for protection you cannot provide for yourselves. We come here asking for partnership, Tae Woo said calmly. We have resources. We have workers. You have nothing we need. Vreth leaned forward. His small black eyes showed no warmth. Insects do not sit at the table of giants, human. Return to your little world. Be thankful we allow you to exist at all. More laughter. Louder this time. Tae Woo looked around the hall and saw hundreds of alien faces twisted with amusement. To them, humanity was a joke. A small, weak species that had stumbled into space by accident. They had been watching humans for a century now. And they had decided that humans would never matter. Tae Woo wanted to scream. He wanted to tell them about the colony on New Haven, where pirates had killed 3,000 people last year while Dominion patrol ships watched and did nothing. He wanted to tell them about the children who grew up afraid of the sky. He wanted to tell them that humans were not insects, but he said nothing. He simply bowed again and walked out of the hall. The journey back to Earth took another 18 months. Tae Woo spent most of it alone in his cabin, thinking. When his ship finally entered orbit around humanity's homeworld, he felt something strange in his chest. It was not sadness. It was not anger. It was something colder and quieter than both. Elder Sung Hwan was waiting for him at the landing platform. The old man was the chairman of the United Earth Council, the highest authority in human space. His white hair moved gently in the wind as Tae Woo approached. I watched the recording, Sung Hwan said. They did not let you finish speaking. No. They laughed at you. Yes. Sung Hwan nodded slowly. Ambassador Kellis arrived while you were traveling home. She delivered the collective's final answer in person. She told me that humanity should accept our place. We are to be resource providers, workers, servants, nothing more. Tae Woo felt his hands form fists at his sides. What did you tell her? I asked her one question. Sung Hwan looked up at the stars. I asked her what happens when the insects stop buzzing. What did she say? She laughed. The old man's voice was soft. She laughed and walked away. That night, the United Earth Council met in emergency session. Every representative from every human colony attended. The room was crowded and hot, filled with men and women who had spent their lives hoping for acceptance from the stars. Now, that hope was dead. Sung Hwan stood before them and spoke for 3 hours. He talked about the raids on human colonies. He talked about the resources stolen, the lives lost, the calls for help that were never answered. He talked about the laughter in the Great Hall, the contempt in Vreth's eyes, the way Ambassador Kellis had smiled when she delivered humanity's death sentence. Then he asked a simple question. What do we do now? The vote was unanimous. Every hand in the room went up at the same time. From that moment forward, Earth went silent. All communications with the Galactic Collective stopped. All human ships withdrew from shared space. All trade agreements were cancelled. All diplomatic channels were closed. The insects had stopped buzzing. The galaxy barely noticed. There were mentions in a few news feeds, small stories buried beneath more important events. The Dominion was fighting a border war. 2 other species were negotiating a trade agreement. A famous entertainer had died. Humanity's silence was not even worth discussing. Tae-woo returned home to his small apartment in the city where he was born. His daughter was waiting for him. She was 12 years old. With her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn chin, she had watched the recording too. "Father," she said quietly, "why do you look so calm? They humiliated you. They called you an insect." They laughed. Tae-woo sat down beside her. Through the window, he could see the lights of the city stretching toward the horizon. Somewhere up there, beyond the clouds, aliens who thought they were gods were already forgetting that humanity existed. "They made a mistake today," he said. "The worst mistake in galactic history." "What mistake?" Tae-woo smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had just discovered something important about himself and his people. "They taught us that we have nothing to lose," he said. "They taught us that kindness will not save us. They taught us that the only thing the galaxy respects is power." He put his arm around his daughter and pulled her close. "So now, we will become powerful, and when we are ready, we will teach them something in return." "What will we teach them?" Tae-woo looked at the stars through the window. His eyes were hard and cold and patient. "We will teach them to fear the silence." Outside, the night was quiet. Earth turned slowly through the darkness, alone and forgotten. But in laboratories and military bases across the planet, lights were coming on. Scientists were returning to their work. Soldiers were beginning to train. Engineers were drawing plans for ships that did not yet exist. The galaxy had ignored humanity's cries for help. Now humanity would give them silence, and in 50 years, when the silence finally broke, the galaxy would learn what happens when you treat insects like they do not matter. The insects had started to build something in the darkness, and they would not stop until the giants learned to fear them. 50 years passed like a slow breath. The galaxy forgot about humanity almost immediately. In the great halls of power, no one mentioned the small species that had retreated to the edge of known space. There were wars to fight, treaties to sign, fortunes to make. The Dominion grew stronger. High Overlord Vreth celebrated his 200th year of rule. Ambassador Kellis was promoted to senior diplomat. Life continued, as it always had. Sometimes, young officers would ask about the silent region on the star maps. What was out there? Why did no signals come from that direction? The older officers would shrug and change the subject. It was just empty space, they said. Nothing worth thinking about. They were wrong. Inside the quarantine zone, humanity was changing. Dr. Minho Kyu stood in his laboratory deep beneath the mountains of Earth. He was a thin man with tired eyes and hands that never stopped moving. For 30 years, he had led Project Silence, the most secret research program in human history. 10,000 scientists worked under him, spread across hidden bases on a dozen worlds. Their job was simple: build weapons that the galaxy had never seen. They did not try to copy alien technology. That would take too long, and humanity would always be behind. Instead, they studied captured Dominion equipment and asked different questions. Not, "How does this work?" but, "What does this fear?" The answer surprised them. The most advanced civilizations in the galaxy depended on one thing more than anything else: communication. Their fleets, their economies, their governments, everything ran on the constant flow of information between stars. Without communication, they were blind and deaf and helpless. So humanity built the quiet. It was not a bomb. It was not a missile. It was something more elegant and terrible. The quiet was a field generator that could silence all electronic communication within a huge area of space. Ships caught inside it could not call for help. They could not coordinate attacks. They could not even talk to each other. They became islands of metal floating alone in the darkness. Dr. Minho Kyu tested the first quiet generator on a small asteroid. When he activated it, every instrument in his laboratory went dead. For 3 minutes, he stood in perfect silence, unable to hear anything except his own breathing. When the field shut down and his equipment came back to life, he smiled for the first time in years. "They wanted us to be quiet," he said to his assistant. "Now we will show them what quiet really means." While the scientists worked on weapons, Captain Hana Sok built a fleet. She was a hard woman with gray hair and scars on her hands from years of combat training. The Dominion had killed her parents during a raid when she was young. She had joined the military the day she turned 16. And she had spent her entire life preparing for revenge. The ships she designed were unlike anything in the galaxy. They were small and fast, painted black and covered with materials that absorbed scanner signals. They carried no weapons that could be detected from far away. They moved through space like shadows, leaving no trace of their passing. Hana named the fleet after silence itself. The first ship was called Whisper. Then came Murmur, Hush, Stillness, and Echo. Eventually, there were hundreds of them, hiding in the darkness at the edge of human space. "We will not fight them in open battle," Hana told her officers. "We will not give them targets to shoot at. We will come in the night, take what we want, and disappear before they know we were there. They will never see us. They will only see the empty spaces where things used to be." On Earth, the children grew up learning a simple lesson. The galaxy had shown humanity no kindness, so humanity owed the galaxy nothing in return. Naride was born in 2419, 32 years after the silence began. She never knew a world where humans trusted aliens. Her teachers taught her about the raids on human colonies, the thousands who died while the Dominion watched and laughed. They showed her the recording of Admiral Tae Woo being humiliated in the Great Hall. They played the sound of alien laughter over and over until she could hear it in her dreams. By the time she was old enough to join the fleet, hatred was not an emotion for Nari. It was simply a fact, like gravity or the color of the sky. Aliens were enemies. They had always been enemies. They would always be enemies. She trained for 6 years on a hidden base far from Earth. She learned to move without making sound. She learned to fight without making noise. She learned to kill with her hands and leave no evidence behind. When she finally put on her uniform and boarded the ship called Echo, she felt nothing but cold purpose. "What do we fight for?" her commander asked on the first day. "We fight for silence," Nari answered. "We fight so they will know what it means to be ignored." Meanwhile, the Dominion grew lazy. High Overlord Vrith spent his days in luxury, surrounded by servants who told him only what he wanted to hear. His fleets controlled half the galaxy. His enemies were weak. His power seemed eternal. One day, Warlord Togun came to him with a concern. Togun was the military commander of the Dominion's eastern territories, a massive creature with 4 arms and a face like a stone carving. He had been studying the old star maps. "The human region has been silent for 50 years, he said. "We should send scouts to investigate." Vreth laughed. "Investigate what? They are probably extinct by now. Even if they survive, what could they possibly do to us? They are insects. Togun, insects with primitive ships and weak weapons. But my lord, enough." Vreth waved one of his hands dismissively. "I have more important matters to consider. The treaty with the collective needs revision. The mining operations in the southern sectors need expansion. I do not have time to worry about dead insects." Togun bowed and left. But as he walked through the corridors of the Dominion Palace, he felt a strange unease in his chest. Something was wrong. He could feel it in his bones. He was right to be worried. In the darkness at the edge of the map, something was waking up. Admiral Tae Woo was old now. His hair was white, his body was weak, and he walked with a cane. But his eyes were still sharp, still cold, still patient. He had spent 50 years preparing for this moment. Dr. Minho Q brought him to the launch bay where the first quiet generators were being installed on the shadow ships. Hana Sok stood beside them, her face unreadable. "We are ready," Minho said quietly. "The weapons work. The fleet is trained. We can begin whenever you give the order." Tae Woo looked at the ships floating in the darkness. They were beautiful in their own terrible way, instruments of revenge that had been built with patience and hate. 50 years ago, they laughed at us, he said. They called us insects. They ignored our pleas and mocked our suffering. They thought we would simply fade away and die. He turned to face his officers. His voice was stronger now, filled with cold fire. They were wrong. We did not fade away. We became something new. Something they have never seen before. Something they cannot understand and cannot defeat. He raised his cane and pointed it at the stars. Begin. The Shadow Fleet moved out of human space for the first time in 50 years. They carried no flags. They sent no messages. They simply disappeared into the darkness, heading toward Dominion territory. The silence was about to break, and when it did, the galaxy would finally learn what happens when you ignore the insects in the corner. The insects had learned to bite. The mining station called Prosperity 7 was home to 12,000 workers. It floated in orbit around a gas giant, pulling valuable minerals from the planet's rings. Every day, cargo ships came and went, carrying wealth back to the Dominion homeworld. It was one of the richest stations in known space. Then, without warning, it went silent. The first sign of trouble came when a scheduled cargo ship arrived and found no one waiting. The station's lights were on. The docking bays were open, but no one answered the communication signals. No one came to guide the ship inside. The cargo captain waited for 2 hours. Then he called for help. When the patrol fleet arrived, they found something impossible. The station was completely intact. The machines were still running. The food in the dining halls was still warm, but every living creature was gone. 12,000 workers had vanished without a trace. The only strange thing they found was the communication equipment. Every radio, every signal device, every piece of technology that could send or receive messages had been melted into slag. It was as if someone had wanted to make sure that no call for help could ever be sent. High Overlord Vreth heard about the incident 3 days later. He dismissed it immediately. Equipment failure, he said. The workers probably panicked and fled on escape ships. Send investigators. Find out what happened. But do not waste my time with this nonsense. 3 weeks later, a military outpost suffered the same fate. Then a colony. Then a shipyard. Each time, the pattern was the same. No destruction. No bodies. No explanation. Just empty buildings and melted communication equipment. The disappeared now numbered in the hundreds of thousands. Fear began to spread through the Dominion. Workers refused to go to isolated stations. Soldiers requested transfers to safe positions near the homeworld. Rumors filled the communication networks. Some said it was a new disease. Some said it was an angry god. Some whispered about ghosts from the dark regions of space. Warlord Togun went to Vreth again. This time, the military commander was not polite. Something is attacking us, he said bluntly. Something we cannot see or detect. And you are doing nothing. Vreth's 4 eyes narrowed with anger. You forget your place, Togun. I am the High Overlord. I decide what threats are real and what threats are imaginary. Tell that to the 300,000 citizens who have disappeared, Togun shouted. Tell that to the families who will never see their loved ones again. Something is hunting us, my lord. And if you do not act, it will grow bolder. Vreth stood up from his throne. He was taller than Togun, and his voice was cold with fury. I will not panic because of mysterious disappearances. I will not weaken the Dominion's image by showing fear. Find the cause. Solve the problem. But do not come to me again with this hysteria. Togun left without another word. But as he walked through the palace corridors, he felt eyes watching him from the shadows. Invisible eyes. Patient eyes. Hungry eyes. He was not imagining it. Captain Hanasok stood on the bridge of the Whisper, watching the Dominion homeworld through her view screen. Her ship was so close that she could see the lights of the cities on the night side of the planet. Yet no scanner detected her. No patrol noticed her presence. Report, she said quietly. Her first officer checked his instruments. All targets have been neutralized. The mining station, the outpost, the colony, the shipyard. Clean operations. No casualties on our side. Where are the prisoners, being transported to holding facilities in human space? They are comfortable, but isolated. No communication devices allowed. Hana nodded. She felt no joy. No triumph. only the cold satisfaction of a job well done. For 50 years, the Dominion had ignored humanity. Now humanity was teaching them what it felt like to lose things without explanation. The next target was personal. Ambassador Kellis was enjoying her retirement on a luxury planet when the shadows came for her. She was sitting in her garden, drinking expensive wine and watching the sunset, when she noticed that her servants had stopped moving. They stood frozen like statues, their eyes wide with fear. Then she saw the figures emerging from the darkness around her estate. They wore black suits that seemed to absorb the light. They made no sound as they walked. They carried no visible weapons. Kellis tried to run. She made it 3 steps before hands grabbed her from behind. A cloth covered her mouth. Everything went dark. When she woke up, she was in a room she did not recognize. It was clean and bright, with no windows and only one door. A table sat in the center of the room, and a man sat behind it. He was old, human. His hair was white, and he walked with a cane, but his eyes were sharp and cold, and something about them seemed familiar. "Do you remember me?" the man asked. Kellis stared at him. Her mind was still foggy from whatever they had used to knock her out. She searched her memory, trying to place his face. I don't. 50 years ago you visited Earth. You told our leader that humanity should accept its place as servants. You laughed when he asked what would happen if we stopped cooperating. The memory came back like a slap. The small blue planet. The old human, with the ridiculous question. The laughter that had bubbled up from her chest because the whole situation was so absurd. "Admiral Taewu," she whispered. "You do remember?" He smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "Good. I wanted you to understand what is happening before we continue." Kellis felt real fear for the first time in centuries. "What do you want? Money? Power? I can give you anything. Just tell me what you want." Taewu gestured to the young woman standing beside him. She was small and fierce, with eyes that held no warmth at all. Ensign Naride pressed a button, and a view screen flickered to life on the wall. Kellis saw hundreds of cells, each one containing a Dominion citizen. They were alive and unharmed, but they sat in perfect silence. No sound came from the speakers. No movement broke the stillness. "They cannot speak," Taewu explained. "They cannot hear. They cannot communicate with anyone. They experience pure isolation, every moment of every day, just like humanity did for 100 years while your Dominion ignored our cries for help." "This is insane," Kellis said. "You cannot do this. The Dominion will destroy you. They will hunt you down and they will try." Taewu leaned forward. "And they will fail. Because we are not the weak insects you remember. We have become something new, something patient, something terrible." Kellis felt tears forming in her eyes. "What do you want from me?" Taewu was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was soft but sharp as a knife. "We do not want anything from you. We do not want your money or your power or your apologies. We want you to feel small. We want you to feel ignored. We want you to scream into the void and hear nothing back." He stood up slowly, leaning on his cane. "You laughed at us, Ambassador. You and everyone like you. You treated us like we did not matter. Now you will understand what that feels like. And when you finally break, when you finally understand what silence truly means, we will let you go back to your people." "Why?" Taewu smiled again. This time, there was something almost sad in his expression. "Because we want you to tell them. We want you to warn them. We want them to know that the insects have learned to bite." He turned and walked toward the door. And by then, it will already be too late. The door closed behind him. The lights dimmed. Kellis was alone in the silence, surrounded by nothing but her own fear and the sound of her racing heart. Outside, the Shadow Fleet continued its work. More stations went dark. More ships disappeared. More voices were silenced. The galaxy was finally learning to be afraid. Warlord Togun had seen enough. For 6 months, the mysterious attacks had continued. Mining stations, military bases, colonies, ships. Every week brought new reports of disappearances, new lists of the missing, new waves of panic spreading through Dominion space. And still, High Overlord Vreth refused to act. But Togun was a soldier, not a politician. He knew how to fight. And he knew that the time for waiting was over. We know where they come from, he told the gathered admirals. The attacks always come from the same direction. The dark region, at the edge of our maps. The place where the humans used to live. Admiral Krell, an old warrior with scars covering half his face, shook his head. The humans? Impossible. They were weak. Their ships were primitive. There is no way they could. Then explain what is happening. Togun slammed his fist on the table. Explain how 1 million citizens have vanished without a trace. Explain how our sensors see nothing, detect nothing, find nothing. Something is attacking us from that region, and the only species that ever lived there was humanity. Silence filled the room. The admirals looked at each other with uncertain eyes. They had spent their entire lives believing that humans were nothing more than insects, unworthy of attention. The idea that those same insects could threaten the Dominion seemed absurd, but absurd or not, something had to be done. Togun made his decision. I am assembling the largest fleet in galactic history. 10,000 warships, every weapon we have. We will travel to the human region and destroy whatever is hiding there. I do not care if it is humans or ghosts or gods themselves. We will burn it all until nothing remains. The fleet gathered over the next 3 months. Ships came from every corner of Dominion space, each one carrying enough firepower to destroy a planet. When Togun finally gave the order to move, his armada stretched across space like a river of steel and fire. High Overlord Vreth watched them depart from his palace. For the first time in many years, he felt a small touch of worry in his chest. But he pushed it down. The Dominion was the most powerful force in the galaxy. Nothing could stand against them. Nothing. The journey took 4 months. Togun spent every day studying old reports about humanity, trying to understand the enemy he was about to face. He read about their short lives, their weak bodies, their primitive technology. Nothing in the records explained how they could have become a threat, but the records were 50 years old. A lot could change in 50 years. When the fleet finally entered human space, they found nothing. Earth's solar system was empty. The human colonies were abandoned. Every station, every base, every city had been evacuated with perfect precision. Not a single human remained. Togun stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the empty planet through his view screen. Oceans and continents rolled beneath him, untouched and silent. Where had they gone? How had they moved billions of people without anyone noticing? Sir, one of his officers said nervously, our scanners are not detecting any ships in the area. No life signs, no energy signatures. It is as if they simply vanished. Togun felt cold fear creeping up his spine. This was wrong. This was all wrong. Spread out, he ordered. Search every planet, every moon, every asteroid. They have to be somewhere. His fleet obeyed. 10,000 ships broke formation and scattered across human space, hunting for any sign of the enemy. Hours passed, then days. They found nothing but empty buildings and silent machines. On the 5th day, the trap closed. It began with a soft hum that filled every ship in the fleet. The sound was barely noticeable at first, like distant music playing just at the edge of hearing. Then the communication systems started to fail. First, the long-range channels went dead, then the short-range radios, then the internal intercoms. Within minutes, every ship in Togun's armada was completely isolated. They could see each other through their view screens, but they could not talk, they could not coordinate, they could not even send simple signals with lights or flags. The quiet had activated. Togun tried to give orders, but no one could hear him. He watched in horror as his perfect fleet fell into chaos. Ships that had been flying in formation began to drift apart. Captains made independent decisions, some charging forward, some retreating, some spinning in confused circles. Then the shadows came. The human ships emerged from hiding places that Togun's scanners had never detected. They were small and black, moving through space like predators, stalking wounded prey. They did not fire weapons. They did not need to. With surgical precision, the Shadow Fleet disabled Togun's ships one by one. They targeted engines first, leaving the massive warships floating dead in space. Then they took out weapon systems, then life support. Not enough to kill, just enough to cripple. Togun watched through his viewport as the greatest fleet in galactic history was reduced to helpless wreckage. His crew pounded on the walls, screaming orders that no one could hear. His officers ran back and forth, trying to find some way to communicate, but there was nothing they could do. A human ship drifted past his viewport. It was so close that Togun could see the name painted on its side. Whisper. On its bridge, a human woman with gray hair looked back at him. She did not smile. She did not gloat. She simply watched him with cold, patient eyes. Then she turned away and disappeared into the darkness. On the Dominion homeworld, High Overlord Vreth watched the battle unfold through emergency relay drones. His hands shook as he saw his invincible armada torn apart by enemies he could barely see. 10,000 ships. The pride of the Dominion, rendered helpless in a matter of hours. The view screen in his throne room flickered. A face appeared that he did not recognize. An old human with white hair and calm eyes. "My name is Sung Hwan," the human said. "I am the chairman of the United Earth Council. You may remember my predecessor. You laughed at him when he asked for help." Vreth could not find words. He simply stared at the screen, his mind unable to process what was happening. "You taught us that the galaxy respects only power," Sung Hwan continued. "We learned that lesson well. Now we will teach you what we learned about silence." The screen went dark. In the depths of space, Warlord Togun sat on the floor of his disabled flagship. The emergency lights cast red shadows across his face. Around him, his crew huddled in small groups, waiting for whatever came next. The airlock hissed open. Human soldiers entered the ship, moving silently through the corridors. They carried no guns that Togun could see, but they moved with the confidence of people who did not need weapons. They took his crew one by one, leading them away without violence or cruelty. When they reached Togun, the lead soldier simply pointed at the airlock. Togun understood. Walk or be carried. He walked. As he passed through the airlock into the human transport, he looked back at his flagship one last time. It hung in space like a dead whale, surrounded by the wreckage of the greatest military force the galaxy had ever seen. He had come to destroy the insects. Instead, the insects had destroyed him, and somewhere in the darkness, humanity was watching. Waiting. Planning the next phase of their revenge. The silence was just beginning. The Dominion homeworld went silent on a Tuesday. There was no attack, no invasion, no ships raining fire from the sky. One moment, the planet was connected to the rest of the galaxy. The next moment, every communication device stopped working. Every signal was blocked. Every call for help disappeared into emptiness. For one full year, the most powerful civilization in the galaxy experienced total isolation. At first, there was panic. Citizens filled the streets, demanding answers that no one could give. The government tried to maintain order, but without communication, coordination was impossible. Cities that had worked together for centuries became separate islands, each one struggling to survive on its own. High Overlord Vreth sat in his palace and watched his empire fall apart around him. He sent messengers on foot to deliver orders. He organized supply chains using paper and handwritten notes. He did everything he could to hold his world together, but nothing worked. Without connection to the stars, without the constant flow of information that made modern civilization possible, the Dominion homeworld slowly collapsed. Not into ruins, but into fear, into isolation, into the crushing loneliness of being forgotten. After 3 months, Vreth understood what the humans had done. They had not come to destroy his people. They had come to teach them a lesson. For 100 years, the Dominion had ignored humanity's cries for help. Now humanity was ignoring them. Vreth spent long nights alone in his throne room, staring at the silent communication screens. He thought about the human admiral he had dismissed so casually 50 years ago. He thought about the laughter that had echoed through the Great Hall. He thought about all the times his people had looked at humans and seen nothing but insects. Now he knew what it felt like to be the insect, to scream and hear nothing back, to beg for attention and receive only silence. When the year finally ended and the quiet field shut down, Vreth did not wait for orders or advice. He went to the communication center himself. and sent one message into the void: "We surrender. Tell us what you want." The response came 3 days later. A human ship appeared in orbit, carrying Ambassador Kellis. She had been released months ago, allowed to return to her people with a message. Now she stood beside human diplomats as they delivered their terms. The surrender ceremony took place in the same hall where Admiral Tae Woo had been humiliated a century before. The same seats, the same podium, the same watching eyes, but now those eyes belonged to representatives from every species in the galaxy. And they looked at humans with newfound terror and respect. Vreth walked to the center of the floor. His robes were simple now, his crown removed. He looked smaller than before, as if the year of isolation had shrunk something inside him. Admiral Tae Woo waited on the podium. He was ancient now, barely able to stand, supported by a young officer named Nari Day. But his eyes were still sharp, still cold, still patient. "Do you remember what you said to me?" Tae Woo asked. His voice echoed through the silent hall. "You said that insects do not sit at the table of giants. You said that humanity had nothing the galaxy needed." Vreth lowered his head. "I remember. You were wrong." Tae Woo leaned forward. "We had something the galaxy needed desperately. We had patience. We had memory. We had the ability to wait and plan and build something you could not imagine. You thought silence made us weak. Instead, it made us dangerous." The surrender was accepted without ceremony. The Dominion fleet was disbanded. Their colonies were placed under observation. Their leaders were removed from power. Everything they had built over centuries was taken apart piece by piece. But humanity did not destroy them. They did something worse. They made them live with what they had done. The Galactic Collective was dissolved. In its place, humanity established something called the Accord of Silence. The rules were simple. Every species had the right to be heard. Every call for help had to be answered. Any civilization that ignored another's voice would experience the quiet. Captain Hana Sok became the first human to sit on the new Galactic Council. She was old now. Her gray hair turned white, her hands shaking with age, but she still had the same hard eyes, the same cold determination. When an alien delegate asked if humanity would ever forgive the Dominion, Hana thought for a long moment before answering. "Forgiveness requires asking," she said finally. "You never asked, you only demanded. You took what you wanted and laughed at those who objected. So no, we will not forgive." The delegate looked confused. "Then what will you do? Keep us as prisoners forever? Take revenge until the end of time?" "No." Hana shook her head. "We will not destroy you. We will not enslave you. We will do something much worse." She paused, letting her words sink in. "We will make you live with what you did. Every day, for the rest of your lives, you will remember how you treated us. You will remember the laughter, the contempt, the cruelty, and you will know that you brought this upon yourselves." The delegate had no response. He simply bowed his head and walked away. Dr. Mingho Q retired after the war. He went to a small planet on the edge of human space, to the place where his parents had been killed during the Dominion raids so many years ago. The colony had been rebuilt now, filled with children who had never known fear of the stars. He built a small house on a hill overlooking the valley. He planted a garden. He spent his days growing vegetables and watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. Sometimes, young people came to visit him. They wanted to hear stories about the war, about the weapons he had built, about the silence that had brought the galaxy to its knees. But Minho never talked about those things. Instead, he talked about his garden, about the way plants grew slowly, patiently, reaching toward the light, about the satisfaction of creating something beautiful after so many years of creating things designed to destroy. "The war is over," he told them. "The silence has served its purpose. Now it is time to grow again." Elder Sung Hwan lived long enough to see the new order established. He was over 100 years old when he finally passed away, surrounded by his family in a hospital on Earth. His last words were a message for Nari Day, who had become one of the most respected leaders in human space. "Remember why we fought," he whispered. "Not for revenge, not for power. We fought so that no one would ever be ignored again. We fought so that every voice would be heard, no matter how small. Do not let them forget. Nari stood at his grave on a cold winter day, watching the snow fall on the fresh earth. Around her, thousands of people had gathered to honor the man who had led humanity through its darkest years. She thought about everything they had sacrificed. 50 years of isolation, generations raised on hatred and fear. The transformation of an entire species into something cold and terrible and patient. Had it been worth it? She looked up at the sky. Through the clouds, she could see the faint lights of ships moving between the stars. Human ships, alien ships, vessels from a dozen different species working together for the first time in history. The galaxy was changing. Slowly, carefully, but changing. A young officer approached her. Ensign Nari, we have received a message from the Galactic Council. They want to know if Earth will host the next meeting of the Accord. Nari smiled. It was a small smile, barely visible, but it was genuine. Tell them yes, she said. Tell them Earth would be honored. She looked back at Sung Hwan's grave one last time. The old man had asked if it was worth it. Now she had her answer. The galaxy had called them insects. The galaxy had ignored their suffering and laughed at their pain. The galaxy had treated them as if they did not matter. Now the galaxy would never ignore anyone again. Not humans. Not any species. The quiet hung over them all like a warning. A reminder of what happened when you treated others as if they did not exist. Was it worth it? Yes, it was worth it. Nari turned and walked back toward the city. Behind her, the snow continued to fall, covering the grave of the man who had taught humanity to embrace the silence. Above the clouds, the stars burned quietly in the darkness. They had always been there, waiting for someone to reach them. Humanity had finally arrived, and the galaxy would never forget their coming.